I dedicated my entire life to our family business. 10 years of 80-hour work weeks, sacrificing relationships, missing out on vacations. Then one Friday, I accidentally discovered legal documents showing my parents had secretly transferred 75% ownership to my brother, Jake, who barely worked part-time. When Dad called me panicking about losing our biggest client just a week after I stopped working, I simply said, "Let Jake handle it." The look on his face was priceless. Before I dive deeper into this wild journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've ever felt underappreciated by family, you'll definitely want to hear what happened next. My story might just give you the courage to stand up for yourself, too. My name is Michael Carter. At 34, I had already given a decade of my life to Carter Builders, our family construction company based in Atlanta, Georgia. Some of my earliest memories are intertwined with Carter Builders, our family construction company based right here in Atlanta, Georgia. I can still picture the warm glow of the desk lamp illuminating Dad's sprawling oak desk late at night, the smell of old blueprints and fresh coffee filling the air. I'd sit under that desk, flipping through sheets of plans while Dad worked tirelessly on the phone with clients, negotiating contracts or calming nerves during stressful project delays. Even as a kid, I was drawn to the world of construction. Not just the buildings themselves, but the relationships, the business, the challenge of turning a vision into reality. By the time I was 8, I knew the difference between a blueprint and a floor plan, and I could identify the major construction sites around town. Summers weren't just about swimming or playing baseball. They meant filing papers, answering phones at the front desk, and absorbing every lesson my father, Richard Carter, was willing to teach me. He took pride in the way I handled clients on the phone, often telling visitors, "That's the Carter Builders spirit right there." Michael's got the business sense to carry this company forward. Dad's pride wasn't empty words. He had a vision that one day I would inherit the company. "Michael," he'd say, gripping my shoulder firmly during those long afternoons, "this business will be yours someday. I'm training you to lead it." Those words became the foundation of my childhood, the silent promise that guided every choice I made. While most kids dreamed of fame, sports, or tech startups, my dream was different. I wanted to build something lasting, something real, a business that would stand the test of time, carrying the Carter name with honor. So when it was time for college, the decision was simple: business management with a minor in construction administration at Georgia Tech. I poured myself into my studies, graduating at the top of my class. Offers from prestigious construction firms and tech companies came my way, but I turned them all down. My heart belonged at Carter Builders. The Monday after graduation, I walked into the family office, stepping into a world that would consume the next decade of my life. I was the first to arrive every morning, often before dawn, and the last to leave every night, sometimes sleeping on the office couch during our busiest seasons. Work wasn't just a job, it was my purpose. I built genuine relationships with every major client, learning their preferences, their families, and what made them tick. I revamped our outdated accounting systems, digitized decades of paper records, and introduced project management software that cut our project delays by nearly 40%. Under my watch as operations manager, revenue doubled. Yet, Dad remained CEO in name, while I handled the heavy lifting behind the scenes. It came at a cost. My personal life was practically non-existent. 2 serious relationships ended because I missed countless date nights and anniversaries due to work emergencies. My apartment became little more than a place to shower and occasionally sleep. Friends stopped inviting me to weekend getaways, expecting my answer would be, "Sorry, I have a project deadline." I miss my college roommates waiting to finalize a major contract with a prominent Atlanta developer, a deal that would have catapulted us to a new level. None of it felt like sacrifice back then. I believed I was building the future I'd always dreamed of. But then there was Jake, my older brother by 2 years. Jake was everything I wasn't. While I was disciplined, focused, and practical, he was carefree, creative, and spontaneous. During his 20s, Jake traveled the world, living in tiny apartments in Barcelona, Florence, and Paris, exploring art galleries, late-night jazz clubs, and Mediterranean beaches. He earned a degree in art history and came back with stories of midnight swims under the stars, gallery openings, and passionate debates about art and culture. Our worlds couldn't have been more different. Despite our differences, I loved Jake deeply. He was my brother, after all. But while I was the responsible one, Dad's analytical, determined son, Jake was the free spirit, Mom's artistic, emotional child. When Jake moved back home 2 years ago after a rough breakup with his French gallery owner boyfriend, my parents welcomed him with open arms. To my surprise, Jake expressed interest in Carter Builders. Dad created a position for him, creative director, even though Jake had zero construction experience. He worked maybe 20 to 25 hours a week, often leaving early, taking long lunches, and generally coasting. At first, I didn't mind. I was glad to have my brother back, and honestly, his ideas for revamping our marketing materials were fresh and exciting. Mom was thrilled to have both her sons involved again. Family dinners, which had become infrequent during my exhausting work schedule, turned into a Sunday ritual. Jake entertained us with wild stories of demanding clients and artistic adventures, while I mostly listened, too drained from the week to join in. But looking back, the warning signs were there. Conversations about the company's future would abruptly stop when I entered the room. Dad and Jake held private meetings I wasn't invited to, and Mom would quickly change the subject whenever I brought up strategic growth plans. "You work too hard, Michael," she'd say, gently refilling my glass. "Let's not talk business tonight." I trusted my family without question. I believed in Dad's promises, that one day Carter Builders would be mine, that all my sacrifices would be worth it, that my dedication mattered. But I was about to learn just how wrong I was. It was a typical Friday afternoon in late September when everything changed. I was digging through our filing cabinets, looking for the original contract for the Riverside development project. There had been some discrepancies in the billing, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it myself. The office was already in chaos thanks to one of Jake's brilliant ideas, a complete reorganization of the filing system that left everything out of order. I rifled through the drawer-marked legal documents, confidential, expecting to find a misplaced contract. What I pulled out was something I wasn't prepared for, a thick manila folder stamped Carter Builders ownership transfer. My stomach dropped as I flipped it open, expecting maybe some old paperwork from decades ago. Instead, I saw a date, March 15th of the current year, only 6 months earlier. My heart started pounding as I scanned the pages. The legal jargon was dense, but the message was crystal clear. 75% ownership of Carter Builders had been transferred to Jay Carter. The remaining 25% was still held by Mom and Dad. And my name? Nowhere to be found in the entire 20-page document. I felt cold. My hands trembled, and the office suddenly felt like it was closing in on me. The bright fluorescent lights were too harsh, and I could barely breathe. I flipped page after page, desperate for an explanation, a clause that would make this make sense. There was nothing. I was completely excluded. The years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, none of it mattered. "Michael, are you okay?" Eleanor Johnson, our office manager who had been with the company longer than I had been alive, stood in the doorway. Her face went from concern to something I can only describe as guilt when she saw the folder in my hands. "Did you know about this?" I whispered, barely able to speak. Eleanor looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I was the last to know," she admitted softly. "Your father asked us not to discuss it. He wanted to tell you himself when the time was right." "When the time was right?" I repeated, voice cracking with disbelief. "It's been 6 months, Eleanor." She reached out to comfort me, but I pulled away, clutching the folder to my chest like a lifeline. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Most of the senior staff were informed for contract signing purposes," she said quietly. The humiliation stung worse than the betrayal. Everyone knew. They'd all watched me give everything I had to Carter Builders, only for my brother to be handed the company behind my back. I barely heard her follow up as I grabbed my purse and left the office without looking back. My laptop, the unfinished reports, none of it mattered anymore. The drive home was a blur. I barely registered the red light I ran or the delivery truck I nearly sideswiped. Every memory of Dad telling me, "This will all be yours someday, Michael," echoed painfully in my mind. His words from the Christmas party last year about retiring at 65 and handing over the reins felt like lies. At my apartment, dark and quiet, I sank onto the couch, the folder still in my hands. The walls, bare except for a few old photos, seemed to close in. What had I done wrong? Was I not enough? Not smart enough? Not creative enough? The questions circled relentlessly. I thought of every project I'd led to success, every client relationship nurtured, every late night and early morning I'd sacrificed. And for what? So Jake could come back after years away and take everything I'd built? The injustice crushed me. Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back began to spill. I reached for my phone and called my best friend Allison, the only person I trusted enough to share this with. "Allison, it's me. I need to talk." Her voice was immediate and concerned. "Michael, are you crying? What happened?" "They gave the company to Jake," I said, the words foreign on my tongue. 75% ownership behind my back 6 months ago. "Oh my God," she whispered. "That's unbelievable. I'm coming over. Don't move." When Allison arrived, she wrapped me in a hug that cracked my numbness. 10 years, Mike," I sobbed. 10 years of my life." "I know," she said softly. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, until there were no tears left, just a hollow ache in my chest and a decision forming in my mind. If my family didn't value what I'd done, I wouldn't give them anything more. Sunday evening arrived with a heavy weight in my chest. After spending Saturday with Allison, mapping out what to say, what to ask, and how to keep my cool, I knew I had to confront my family. The truth was out. There was no hiding anymore. I pulled up to my parents' suburban home in the quiet Atlanta neighborhood we'd all grown up in. The familiar brick facade and manicured lawn looked oddly foreign, like the house of strangers. The smell of Mom's pot roast, my favorite, wafted through the air as I stepped inside without knocking. Dad sat in his usual armchair, glasses perched low on his nose, poring over project documents. Jake was setting the dining table, laughing at something Mom had just said in the kitchen. The scene was so normal, so routine, it felt surreal after everything I just learned. "Michael," Mom called out brightly as she caught sight of me. Perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready. I forced a smile, accepting her hug like a machine. "Can I help with anything?" I asked. No, Jake said with a grin. "We've got it covered. Just relax." Jake shot me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey bro, how was your Saturday? Tried texting you about the new client presentation, but no response. Because I've been too busy having a complete breakdown over the fact that he now owned my life's work." I thought bitterly. "Just needed some offline time," I said vaguely. Dad finally looked up from his papers. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd skip dinner. We have some exciting news about the Westridge project." The casual way he spoke, like nothing had changed, snapped something inside me. But I bit my tongue. Not yet. I needed to hear it all. Dinner was unbearable. I pushed food around my plate while the family talked business as usual. Jake eagerly detailed his ideas for a new marketing campaign. Dad nodded approvingly at everything he said. Mom tried to steer the conversation towards safe topics: the garden club, the neighbor's new dog, a charity fundraiser. I barely spoke, offering one-word answers when asked. If anyone noticed, they didn't mention it. After dessert, apple pie I couldn't bring myself to taste, Dad stood up. "I think I'll catch the end of the game. Jake, stop by my study later. We need to talk supplier issues." It was now or never. "Actually," I said, voice steadier than I felt, "I need to talk to all of you." The room froze. Mom's hand paused midair. Jake's smile faded. Dad sat back down slowly. "What's going on, Michael?" Mom asked, concern creeping into her voice. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder, placing it deliberately in the center of the table. "When were you planning to tell me about this?" The silence was deafening. Dad's face hardened, the expression he used with tough clients. Mom's eyes widened in shock. Jake looked down at his lap, suddenly absorbed in his napkin. "Where did you get that?" Dad finally asked. "Does it matter?" I shot back. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I supposed to work 80-hour weeks for the rest of my life without knowing my brother owns the company?" Mom reached for my hand. Sweetheart, we were going to tell you. We just couldn't find the right time. I yanked my hand away. The right time would have been before you signed these papers, Mom. Not 6 months later. Michael, Dad said firmly, slipping into his authoritative business voice. This was a strategic decision for the future of Carter Builders. Jake has fresh ideas, a new vision, he added. I couldn't hold back. After 10 years of doubling revenue, sacrificing relationships, missing weddings, you say you want a new vision? You rejected my ideas for years and then gave them to Jake along with 75% of the company, while I kept working myself to exhaustion, thinking I was building my future. You're too much like me, Dad replied as if that explained everything. Too traditional. The construction industry is changing. So teach me, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. If you wanted different ideas, why didn't you talk to me? Mom weakly interjected. You've always been so practical, so logical about business decisions. Practical enough to work myself to death for a company that was promised to me? I thought bitterly. Jake finally spoke up. Mike, it wasn't like that. Dad approached me. Don't. I cut him off. Don't pretend you didn't know what you were taking from me. That's unfair. Dad interrupted. Jake's been instrumental in our recent growth. Her expansion plans for residential markets. I laughed bitterly. You mean the exact same plans I presented 3 years ago? The ones you called too risky? Dad's silence confirmed my suspicion. Let me get this straight, I continued, voice shaking. You rejected my ideas, then gave them to Jake along with 75% of the company while I worked myself to exhaustion, thinking I was building my future. Michael, you're being dramatic, Dad said dismissively. You still have a job, a good job with growth potential. Growth potential? I repeated incredulously. I've been running this company for years while you play golf with clients. What exactly am I supposed to be growing toward now? Mom pleaded. Jake needs your experience. You two have always made a good team. We're not a team, Mom, I snapped. I'm the workhorse, and he's the owner. There's a difference. I turned to Jake. How many hours did you work this week? 20? 25? I pulled 3 all-nighters, finalizing the Anderson bid. Jake looked ashamed. I know you work harder than me, Mike. I've always admired your dedication. Admired it so much you took the company that should have been mine, I thought. That's enough, Dad thundered, standing up. This business decision wasn't made lightly. Jake has qualities this company needs moving forward. And what are those? I asked. The ability to take 3-hour lunches and charm clients? Meanwhile, I've dedicated my entire adult life to Carter Builders. I've missed weddings, ended relationships, sacrificed everything because I believe in the future you promised me. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Dad demanded, so what now? What do you want? I stood slowly, gathering my purse and the folder. Nothing. Not anymore. If Jake owns the company, he can run it. I quit. You can't quit, Dad sputtered. We have the Anderson project starting next week, the Maxwell bid due Friday, the quarterly financials. Let Jake handle it, I said coldly. I'm done working for free. Mom started crying. Michael, please. We're family. Family doesn't do this to each other, Mom, I said, moving toward the door. Pausing, I looked back at the shocked faces. I'll email my formal resignation tomorrow. Don't worry, I'll be professional, unlike some people in this room. I didn't look back again. Monday morning came, but it didn't feel like a typical Monday. For the first time in over a decade, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but I didn't reach for my phone to check emails or dive into the day's endless to-do list. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange emptiness where purpose used to be. Without Carter Builders, who was I? The routine I'd lived by for 10 years, shower by 5:45, coffee and emails by 6:15, out the door by 6:30, felt meaningless now. I made coffee out of habit, but left it untouched on the counter. I opened my closet and stared at the neatly hung business suits, then closed it without choosing anything. Eventually, I pulled on worn-out yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, clothes I'd only wear on rare weekends, now a symbol of a new kind of freedom. By 7 a.m., I checked my phone at least a dozen times. No calls from Dad. No frantic texts from Jake. Part of me wanted to hear from them, to be pulled back into the chaos I knew. Another part of me felt relief, a chance to breathe, to process. At 8:30, I called my mentor from college, William Barnes, who ran his own successful engineering firm. He'd been trying to recruit me for years. "Michael," he said warmly, surprised to hear from me. "This is unexpected. Don't tell me Richard finally pushed you too far." I laughed bitterly. "You have no idea." Over the next hour, I poured out the story, every betrayal, every sacrifice, every sleepless night. William listened without interruption, occasionally letting out sounds of disbelief or anger on my behalf. "That's unconscionable," he said when I finished. "After everything you did for that company. Unbelievable. Was I a fool to believe him all these years?" I asked. "No," he said firmly. "You were loyal. Loyalty isn't foolish, but it should be reciprocated." "So what do I do now?" I asked, desperate for direction. "First, protect yourself," William advised. "Document everything, your contributions, client relationships, any proprietary systems or processes you developed. Not to take from them, but to clearly establish your value wherever you go next." I spent the rest of the morning following his advice. I created a comprehensive document detailing every major project I managed, every client relationship I nurtured, every system I implemented. I was careful to include only facts and figures, avoiding anything that might cause legal issues later. But I kept personal notes on client preferences, relationship-building techniques, and operational shortcuts. My personal edge that wasn't officially recorded. At noon, I drafted a formal resignation email. It was professional, detached, giving no hint of the emotional turmoil underneath. I stated that I would take my accumulated 6 weeks of vacation immediately, as per my contract. I'd never taken more than a long weekend in 10 years, and the unused time had piled up. I set up an email autoresponder. "I am currently out of the office and unavailable. For all inquiries, please contact Jake Carter at email address." Then I turned off my work phone and placed it in a drawer. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Administrative tasks, reviewing my contract with my lawyer friend Sofia Rodriguez to ensure I wasn't breaching any clauses, gathering personal financial documents, and updating my resume for the first time in years. "You realize you're incredibly marketable, right?" Sophia said, reviewing my experience. "Any construction firm would be lucky to have you." Her words hit me like a bomb. I hadn't allowed myself to consider life beyond Carter Builders. That night, after dark, I drove back to the office to collect my personal belongings. I chose 9 p.m. deliberately, late enough so no one would be there, but not so late as to arouse suspicion on the security cameras. I still had my key and security code, and I had every right to collect my things. The office was eerily quiet. I moved efficiently, packing photos, awards, reference books, and a few decorative items I'd accumulated over the years. I left behind anything the company had paid for, no matter how small. No reason to give them any excuse to accuse me of impropriety. As I emptied my desk, I found a framed photo from the company's 25th anniversary 5 years ago. Dad had his arms around both Jake and me, all of us smiling proudly. We looked so happy, so united. Had it all been an illusion? For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was still my family, despite everything. Was I overreacting? Throwing away not just my career, but my relationship with my parents and brother? Then I remembered the ownership transfer document, the private meetings, the broken promises. I placed the photo face down in a box, switched off the office lights for the last time, and left my keys on Eleanor's desk with a brief note. "Please forward my final paycheck." As I drove home, grief and liberation mingled in my chest. A chapter had ended, but maybe a new one, where I valued myself properly, was about to begin. The first few days of freedom felt both exhilarating and disorienting. For the first time in years, I slept past sunrise, until 9 a.m. to be exact. I spent mornings in a strange limbo, checking my phone constantly for messages that never came. The silence from my family was deafening. Surely by now, they must have realized I wasn't coming back. I began small rituals to reclaim myself. Morning walks in the park I had driven past countless times but never visited leisurely breakfasts instead of gulped coffee, while scanning emails and yoga classes I had always put off. I read novels for pleasure, something I hadn't done since college, and tried to quiet the relentless voice in my head asking what emergency was unfolding at the office. By day 3, the text began. Jake, Dad, Mom, all asking for updates, client documents, cost projections. I didn't respond to any of them. On day 4, Dad's voicemail came through, laced with frustration. Michael, this is ridiculous. We have responsibilities to our clients. Call me back immediately. Mom's messages were more subtle, dripping with guilt. Sweetheart, we're all worried about you. This isn't like you to abandon your work like this. Family businesses are complicated, but we can work through it together. I deleted every message. Over the first week, I developed a self-care routine to process the anger and betrayal. Morning journaling helped vent emotions. Afternoon calls with executive recruiters, stunned by my qualifications, gave hope for the future. Evening conversations with old friends I'd neglected rekindled bonds and reminded me I wasn't alone. But the mental battle was far from over. I vacillated between feelings of empowerment, finally standing up for myself, and crushing depression over the years wasted. Sometimes I'd find myself standing in my kitchen, staring blankly at the wall, reliving moments when I should have seen the signs but didn't. On day 6, my biggest client, Maxwell Anderson, called my personal cell. His voice was gruff. Michael, what's going on over there? I've been working with your brother, but he doesn't have half your knowledge of our project requirements. Maxwell's company represented nearly 30% of Carter Builder's annual revenue. I'm on extended leave right now. I explained carefully. Jake should be able to assist you. That's not what I'm asking, Maxwell pressed. You've been my point person for 5 years. Suddenly you're on leave, and no one at Carter Builders will give me a straight answer. I got a $12 million project starting next month, and I need someone competent running it. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar pull of responsibility. It would be easy to jump back in and fix things. Mr. Anderson, I'm no longer in a position to manage your project. If you don't have confidence in current leadership, perhaps you should consider other options. There was a long pause. Then he said, if your situation changes, you have my number. And Michael, if you end up elsewhere, I'd appreciate a call. Loyalty to good project managers trumps loyalty to companies in my book. Hearing that, I allowed myself to genuinely imagine a future separate from Carter Builders for the first time. Exactly 1 week after walking away, Dad called again, panic in his voice. Michael, Anderson is threatening to pull their contract, $12 million. He won't work with Jake. You need to come in tomorrow and smooth things over. A strange calm settled over me. 7 days ago, I'd have rushed to the office, working through the night to save the relationship. Let Jake handle it, I said evenly. He owns the company. Michael, this isn't a game, Dad shouted. This is the business your grandfather started. Your heritage. Your heritage? I interrupted, anger flaring. You gave my heritage to Jake. I don't have time for this. And with that, I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to choose. 2 days after that tense phone call, I found myself sitting across from my family in a neutral location, a riverside restaurant in downtown Atlanta. Alongside them was Harold Peterson, our longtime family lawyer, who was there to oversee the legal details if an agreement was reached. Mom greeted me with a tentative hug, but I offered only a handshake. This wasn't a family reunion. It was business. Dad started formally. We've reviewed your proposal. Before he could say more, Jake interjected nervously. Michael, I want to say something first. Her voice wavered as she looked directly at me, twisting her napkin. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you or take what you worked so hard for. Her apology caught me off guard. She continued, I'm overwhelmed. I've been working 18-hour days trying to keep up. The Anderson account alone is like hieroglyphics to me. You've been here 2 years, I reminded gently. Didn't you notice how things operated? I thought I could learn as I went, but without you, it was impossible, she admitted, voice trailing off. Dad cleared his throat. What your sister is saying is, we made a mistake. It was the first time in 34 years I heard Dad admit an error. Jake added quietly, Dad didn't tell me you were promised the company from the start. Not until after the papers were signed. I looked at Dad, who hung his head in shame. Is that true? I asked. He nodded slowly. I may have downplayed expectations. I thought it would be easier for everyone. Mom reached across the table, almost touching my hand, but stopped herself. We've hardly slept since you left, Michael. Not just because of business, but because we hurt you. That was never our intention. Harold cleared his throat and pulled out draft agreements. For the next hour, we negotiated. Dad initially offered me 20% ownership. I flatly rejected it. Then Jake surprised everyone by offering to transfer 35% of her share to me. I never wanted to be majority owner, she said. I just wanted to be part of the family business without being stuck in operations. You could have said that 10 years ago, I said, though my words felt softer than a week earlier. By the end, we had a deal. I would receive 35% ownership transferred from Jake, reducing her stake to 40%. Mom and Dad would retain their combined 25%. I would become Chief Operations Officer, with equal decision-making authority to Jake, who would focus on creative direction and client relationships, her strengths. Board decisions would require majority approval, ensuring no major changes could be made without agreement from at least two of us. Most importantly, the agreement included a mandatory 45-hour workweek maximum for all executives, with at least 3 weeks of annual vacation. The endless grind that had defined Carter Builders under Dad's leadership was officially over. As Harold drafted final points, Jake leaned toward me. Can we talk? Just the two of us. I hesitated but nodded. Outside on the riverside patio, away from the tension inside, Jake said, I never wanted to hurt you. When Dad asked me to take over, he said you were too valuable in operations to move into ownership. And you believe that? I asked skeptically. It was flattering to be wanted after feeling like the family disappointment. The artsy brother who couldn't hold a real job, Jake admitted. I stared at her, incredulous. You thought I was the favorite? Dad talked constantly about my fresh perspective. Only after I returned did the "why can't you be more like Michael" comment stop. We never really talked about the important stuff, did we? I said. No, Jake agreed. We were too busy competing for attention. I don't want to be CEO, she said quietly, but I want to contribute, especially if I have your expertise to help implement ideas properly. For the first time, I could imagine a future where we complemented each other instead of competing. Back inside, we signed the agreement. Dad first, then Mom, Jake, and finally me. As I put down the pen, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not gone, but lighter. Dad asked, will you come back to the office tomorrow? Anderson is still threatening to pull the contract. I shook my head. Not tomorrow. I need time to process and consider a job offer I'm seriously thinking about. His eyes widened. You have other options? 5 more weeks of vacation, actually, and I think I'm going to take some of it. As we parted ways, Mom hugged me. We have a lot to rebuild, not just the business. Yes, I said softly. We do. That night, I called Garrett Westfield, the CEO of a competing firm who'd offered me a lucrative position. I can't say I'm not disappointed, he said, but I understand the pull of family. Our offer stands if things don't work out, he added. I thanked him sincerely. With that safety net, I opened a bottle of wine, sat on my balcony, and did something I hadn't done in years. Absolutely nothing. No emails, no crises, no project planning. Just watching the sunset and imagining a future where work mattered, but didn't consume me. For the first time in a decade, I breathed freely. The weeks that followed felt like a fresh start, not just for Carter Builders, but for me personally. When I walked into the office as co-owner and chief operations officer, it wasn't the corner office Dad had once promised me. Instead, I was given a redesigned workspace, large windows letting in natural light, room for both a traditional desk and a comfortable meeting area. It symbolized the new dynamics between Jake and me and the company as a whole. The time off I took before returning was transformative. For the first time in years, I had real vacation, 10 glorious days at a beach resort where I did nothing but read novels, swim, and sleep. No emails, no deadlines, just peace. When I came back, I worked with a career counselor who helped me establish boundaries I'd never dared to set before. The relentless 80-hour workweeks were replaced with a manageable 45-hour schedule. Weekends became mine again, reserved for friends, hobbies, and self-care. Carter Builders changed, too, with Jake focusing on client acquisition and marketing, her natural talents, and me managing operations, finance, and project execution. The company finally operated in harmony. Dad reluctantly stepped into an advisory role, mentoring younger staff while gradually scaling back his hours with a 3-year retirement plan. Our biggest client, Maxwell Anderson, was reassured by the new management structure. "Michael, I'm confident the project will get the attention it deserves," Jake told me during a morning meeting. I tried so hard to connect with him, but he kept asking for you. "He's old school," I replied with a smile. "Values competence over charm." We had fallen into an unexpected rhythm, acknowledging each other's strengths without the competition that had characterized our relationship for so long. The staff responded well to the change, relieved that the culture of endless work was over. New project management systems improved efficiency and reduced overtime, and the overall atmosphere was calmer, more balanced. Eleanor, our longtime office manager, stopped by my office one afternoon. "It feels different," she said. "Better, less frantic. More balanced," I corrected with a smile. She nodded. "Your father built something impressive, but it was one-dimensional. With you and Jake working together, there's a completeness that was missing before." That feeling stayed with me throughout the day, in meetings, client calls, and even as I left the office at a reasonable hour. That evening, I had dinner plans with Nathan Rivera, an engineer I'd met through the Anderson project years ago. We had reconnected during the negotiation period, and his quiet competence and dry humor were a welcome distraction from the family drama. As I gathered my things, Jake appeared in my doorway. "Heading out already?" she teased. The Michael she knew would have stayed late, until midnight at least. "This one has an ownership stake and dinner reservations," I replied. She laughed. "Mysterious Nathan." "Huh? Second date already? Too soon for family interrogations," I said with a grin. Jake hesitated. "Mom called. She wants to reinstate Sunday family dinners. Says we need healing time, or something equally mom-like." The thought of returning to those dinners, with all their complicated history, made me pause. "I don't know," I said. "We'll talk about it." "No pressure." She smiled, adjusting the colorful scarf around her neck, a remnant of her artistic days, now complementing her professional attire. "For what it's worth, I think we could use the practice of being a normal family, whatever that means." A month ago, I would have rejected the idea outright. Now, I found myself considering it. "Maybe. Let me think about it." That's all I asked. As I drove to the restaurant, I marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The business was thriving. Our first quarter projections showed improvement under the new leadership. Jake had brought in 3 new accounts with innovative approaches. I had implemented operational efficiencies that reduced costs without sacrificing quality. Even Dad seemed relieved to be stepping back, though he still occasionally offered unsolicited advice. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my life. I went to the gym 3 times a week. I joined a book club. I was even thinking about adopting a dog, something I never would have considered during those 80-hour work weeks. When Nathan asked about my family, I found I could tell him the recent drama without the raw pain that had accompanied it just weeks before. "So, you stood your ground and got what you deserved," he said, raising his glass. "That's impressive." It wasn't just about winning, I reflected. It was about being valued by them and by myself. "Well, speaking as someone who's worked with both Carter and Westfield," Nathan smiled, "they're lucky to have kept you." That Sunday, after much thought, I decided to attend the family dinner. Driving to my parents' house no longer filled me with anxiety. When Jake opened the door instead of Mom, I knew they had planned this carefully, easing me back into the family through the relationship that had started to heal first. Dinner was different from old gatherings. Dad was quieter, less domineering. Mom watched us all with hopeful eyes, changing the subject whenever business talk threatened to take over. Jake and I maintained the new rapport we had developed, different from childhood, but healthier. As we cleared the dishes, Dad approached me in the kitchen. "I've been meaning to tell you," he said awkwardly. "The board presentation you and Jake gave last week was exceptional. better than anything I could have done. From him, this was monumental, an admission that the company might actually be better under our leadership than his. We make a good team, I acknowledged. Different strengths, different perspectives. Yeah, he said, clearing his throat. I should have seen that sooner. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Dad, it was close. The next week, Jake and I presented a comprehensive 5-year plan to the board, a true collaboration combining her vision for market expansion with my operational strategy. As we stood side by side, confidently answering questions and building on each other's points, I caught Dad watching us with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't pride exactly, but a kind of wonder, as if witnessing something remarkable unfolding. Later, celebrating with champagne in my office, Jake raised her glass. To losing the business, she said. I raised an eyebrow. If Dad hadn't made that stupid decision, she explained, we'd still be stuck, me feeling inadequate, you working yourself to death, him controlling everything. Sometimes, I said slowly, losing what you think you want leads to getting what you really need. We clinked glasses to finding something better. Looking out at the city skyline, I thought about the painful journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and how standing up for my worth had changed everything. I hadn't just secured ownership in the family business. I'd reclaimed ownership of my life. And that, I realized, was worth more than any company ever could be. Thank you for watching. Remember, knowing your worth isn't selfish, it's essential. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest person to stand up to is the one who raised you, but doing so can lead to the most rewarding outcomes.